It was over 5 years ago now that we had just started the business, and I'll never forget, it coincided with an individual that was seeking one-on-one coaching. And at this time, I was the only one-on-one coach. Praise God, we've grown beyond that now. But so I was the person he was going to be working with. And he really came to us saying, I want vision for my business. I want to grow my business. I want to expand my business. I want vision for my business. And obviously told him I think we could provide that, sold him on the services and the path that we were going to walk through to help him accomplish that, but then was already really convinced that the principle, although I didn't have this language at the time, rang true. If you want to put your business in order, start by putting yourself in order. So we started with something back then that we still do today in coaching, which was like a deep dive intensive of let's just basically lift up the hood on your life, your leadership, and your business. I'm just going to pepper you with questions on the status of things, the health of things, how you think things are going, how other people perceive things are going, and really just get our thumb on the pulse of the vitals. It was a little bit informal back then. Now we have really formalized and mechanized and operationalized ways of doing this. But really, I was just trying to wrap my head around where's this person at? And one of the things that stood out was his business was actually doing well from a profitability standpoint. It wasn't necessarily expanding or growing or moving forward, but it was stable. But what wasn't stable was, he said, I haven't focused on my personal health in a really, really long time. He said that my marriage is really struggling because there's some unresolved things that we haven't discussed and addressed. He said, I feel a little bit spiritually confused or not certainly growing. And so all of that stuff was going on at home. And then he also said, I want to grow as a leader. Like, I don't feel like I'm actually leading our business anywhere. And so basically what we walked through is we said, instead of kind of working on a plan initially to revamp your entire business, let's take that principle seriously. If you want to put your business in order, start by putting yourself in order. And I said, what if we just applied ourselves first to your morning routine? And he looked at me like, I'm paying you to tell me what time to wake up in the morning. I said, just trust me. Let's just talk about like, what would make your mornings better if you did it every single day? And conversely, like if you were to do that every single day, like it would have ramifications into everything else you do. And so we focused on things like his wake up time, like his consumption of scripture, like his way of engaging with prayer, the way, and then beyond that, we started to look at his relationships. We were focused almost entirely on personal. And I'll never forget, I had a feedback call with him and he's like, he said, it's good. He said, we're spending a lot of time on me. And he said, and that's not necessarily why I signed up for coaching. I said, I understand, just trust me. And in my mind, I had just started doing this. I was like, I really hope this works out because I'm not positive this is going to work out. And sure enough, he started following the process. He started to remake his mornings. He started to make sure he was getting consistent exposure to truth. That started to make his thoughts and just attitude and approach to his marriage, his finances, his growth healthier. He started to pray a little bit more and connect with the God of the universe and focus on what was good, right, beautiful, and true. And what was crazy is we could look up 6 months, certainly a year, and he could tell the story. My marriage is healthier. I am training for a marathon. I feel like I'm spiritually alive. And not only that, I have grown as a leader. We've hired people, which we weren't hiring before. And I'm getting the best people I've ever gotten because I can culturally lead them into a greater vision. And our business has vision and is growing. And that's when I was like, that's why we do what we do, right? And so when we talk about mission, there's so many stories I could tell, but I always think back to one of those core first stories where it's like, we focus so hardcore on his personal growth. Why? Because he's a leader. And when a leader gets better, everybody wins. Like there's an overflow effect to that. And ultimately, the process of writing a mission statement was us just saying, how do we capture what happens in interactions like what happened with that gentleman 5 years ago so that we as a team know deep down, this is the soul of the business. This is why we do what we do. And this is the thing that we absolutely refuse to depart from.
Break that story down a little bit. So what is some evidence that maybe you either don't have a mission or you had a mission and you're now off base from that? Because I feel like that was what was apparent in this guy's business and in his life. And then from that, break down what does it look like when, just from a higher level, when a business is aligned in their mission, is being effective, is, that mission has permeated the staff, the culture, and the operation of what they're doing.
Yeah. Well, what's interesting is it's almost like there's two teaching points out of this. I look at it as like customer interactions like that is how we discovered our mission. But part of what we do for work is we help other people describe and discover the mission that they're on. Let's clarify some terms real quick. We think that businesses and leaders win when they can answer three questions. Number one is, why do we exist? Number two is, what do we stand for? And number three is, where are we going? And you can, and people do, call the answer to those questions a multitude of things. You could call it a purpose statement. You could call it a manifesto, right? There's all these like disagreements basically about what word you should use. Quite frankly, I don't care what word you use. I will tell you what word we use. The answer to why do we exist is found in your mission. And the critical distinction that I want to make sure people hear and understand, that we can talk about later in the conversation if we want to, is the mission is our answer to why do we exist. That's the thing that is probably most core to the heart and soul of our business. It is not our answer to what do we do. And that's a critical distinction, right? So in this gentleman's case, if we were to look at his business, really what was going on in his world was the same as what had gone on in our world beforehand. Is people, rarely if ever start a business without some type of mission, without some sense of why. It's way too much work. It's way too much risk, right? Why would you ever do anything for such a sustained period of time without a reason, without a why? And there are people out there that the reason why they start is strictly personal. It's basically their owner's intent, and it doesn't go any further than that, right? Like, I want to be able to go on as many vacations throughout the year as I want to, right? I can't work for anyone else. I have this income goal. That is really like your personal owner's intent. What we find is that for someone to really be attracted to what we talk about at Path for Growth, you are expanding beyond your owner's intent, and you're thinking, what is the grander impact that I want to make with this business? Like, there's a deeper calling or sense of why to why you're building what you're building. That's why we always say that we work with impact-driven leaders, right? And so in this gentleman's case, he had started his business with legitimate purpose, with legitimate intent that was personal, but then also like legitimate impact for providing opportunities for team members and making sure that people had a place to be able to grow and flourish and to create an impact on the customers that he served. He had all of that in his head. What he didn't have is a codified statement that could remind him, why am I doing this? And that's fine if you're in the first year or two, right? But what's crazy is if you get a year or two in, and with that year or two in, you start to become a little bit successful, what shows up is distractions that look like opportunities. And you start to get diluted in your effectiveness because you don't have an anchoring statement that says, this is why I'm doing what I'm doing. And that decision should, in the future, operate as a filter for everything moving forward. So in his case, and in our case as a business, the process of creating a mission is not saying, I'm going to dream about something that doesn't exist and try to put words to some imaginary statement of purpose. Rather, it's what are the best possible words to describe why I started in the first place and why I'm energized about this thing whenever it's at its absolute best. We're going to try and put words around the soul of the business so that that soul is never lost.
Makes me think of that. The analogy of flying from like LA to New York, and with the curvature of the earth, the plane always having to continually correct back a few degrees. And it's like, if you start from LA and you're 2 degrees off course, you're going to be way off course by the time that you get to, what you thought was New York.
That's right.
So kind of the same idea. Mission is core values as well, but mission being a compass for your business and for your organization.
And for founders and owners that are impact driven, I think it's a act of accountability to take your mission seriously. To say, what is the soul of this business? Why does this business exist? In our most naive early founder stages, like, why are we doing this? We're going to put words to that, because in some ways, one of the things that you're saying there is, I am radically susceptible to being distracted by inferior reasons. Right. Like, I mean, we talked about this in a recent episode. Like, I am so capable of this thing growing, and suddenly I started with a really healthy, strong, people-oriented, God-glorifying mission, but now I've been persuaded by wealth. Now I've been persuaded by fame. Now I've been persuaded by image. And we look at all of these figures that we say, oh man, they started and they were so good, but now they've gotten deviated. A lot of times it's because they never codified that reason and they were never held accountable to that reason. And so of course they went off track because all of the distractions are so tempting and so readily available.
So you already stated this, but state those 3 questions again that, the mission needs to answer.
So it's not the mission that needs to answer them. I would say the mission needs to answer, why do we exist?
Okay.
Core values answer, what do we stand for? Vision answers, where are we going? And so what we're really focused on in this episode is, why do we exist?
Cool. What is Path for Growth's mission?
I'm so glad you asked. And I bet I could ask you the same question. Do you have it memorized, Ben?
We exist to help impact-driven leaders step into who they were created to be so that others benefit and God is glorified.
Okay, praise God. Yeah. You learn as a founder, you're like, man, you're really putting people on the spot when you hope they have it memorized, but you're also putting yourself on the spot because you're like, I tell everyone that our team members have this memorized, and I'm going to look like a fool if he doesn't. So praise God that you've got it. That's awesome.
We practice what we preach.
That's exactly right. So that's how much I and we care about this, is like, all team members memorize this and keep this memorized. So to Ben's point, I better operate in alignment too. Our mission that you're going to hear us talk about a lot today is, we exist to help impact-driven leaders step into who they were created to be so that others benefit and God is glorified.
I mean, I know there's multiple facets to this mission, and you could we even said before this, like, you could probably break this down word by word as to why you picked the language that you did. How did this mission really come about? I mean, you shared this story from the beginning. Was that really the beginning of Path for Growth's mission, or did you already have a grasp of what you wanted that to be before you started the business?
It's a good question. I did have a grasp on what I wanted it to be whenever I started the business, but I would tell you that the extent of that grasp was whenever I was working at Ramsey. Again, we were talking about me having a little bit of a speaking and content creation presence there as a Ramsey personality. We were just in early innings of having those discussions. And they kept asking me, like, what's the thing that you are like just relentlessly passionate about, that you want to see come to the world, that you're also uniquely qualified to speak on, like that you have experience in? And what I found is, at that time especially, I wasn't just a business guy, and honestly, just focusing on business was not my only passion or my primary passion. I love what business can do for people, but I'm not the guy that just loves to geek out about business, right? And so I said business is a part of it, but it's not the only thing. And so then I really thought, well, what are the other things that I enjoy? I really love and am passionate about people understanding, like, personal growth and self-improvement and the opportunity that's available to them when they grow and self-improve. And so for a while, it was like, okay, are you going to talk about business or are you going to talk about self-improvement and personal growth? And that was a little bit of the question that was going on. And then I said, but wait, there's more. I am also really passionate about leadership. And it was kind of this, like, 3 separate things. Like, am I a leadership person, kind of like John Maxwell? Am I a business person? That I would actually say Dave Ramsey is more of a traditional business guy, or you can think of a number. Morgan Housel is more of a traditional business speaker, right? There's a number of Alex Hormozy is a business speaker, right? First, and so it was like, am I more of that because there's a lot of money in that, right, to say the least, or am I more of a personal growth person? And I started to have these thoughts around, well, I get a little bit of a cringy feeling whenever I just think about self-improvement. And one of the things that I realized is I don't actually get cringy about self-improvement. What I get cringy about, and what just makes my skin crawl, is selfish improvement. It's like all these people out there that are like, me getting better for the sake of me getting better, and then making sure all of you know about it. And then one of the things that I started to realize is that there's also a spiritual component to it, that if there's not the spiritual side to it for me, then ultimately it falls short or lacks meaning or lacks power. And so what I realized is I'm thinking about all of these things as separate, and what they really are is almost what I believe to be almost like this flywheel or this 3-circle Venn diagram of personal growth and self-improvement is so critically important. But why are you doing that? Not just so you can get better and everyone knows about it. It's so that others benefit, right? And I actually believe that when you personally grow and other people benefit from the overflow of that, well, then that starts to feed into the leadership and business arena. And then on the 3rd circle is like there's a faith and spiritual component to that makes that all matter. So that was the extent to which I had thought about it. And it was honestly probably more jumbled than that, but I could draw it out on a whiteboard. But before I started the business. And then I started to see stories like the gentleman I talked about at the beginning. And really that's just one of a number of stories of when we did it right. And I also saw times when people paid us and we did something for them. And I was like, well, we provided value there, but that wasn't why the business existed. Like that wasn't the work that we were uniquely designed and designated to do or called to do. And so it was at a certain point, there reached a boiling point where we said, okay, we have enough evidence available to us in terms of when we are at our best, when we are most on fire for the work, when our team members are most engaged in what we're doing. Now it's time to put words to these. And that's where it became, we exist to help impact-driven leaders step into who they were created to be, personal growth, self-improvement, so that like this has to be inextricably linked. The reason why we are investing in personal growth and you being who you were created to be is so that others benefit, right? From the overflow of you stepping into the person God created. And then the result of that being the spiritual element, God being glorified. And so it was really finally us just saying, we've got mounds of evidence of when we are at our best and when we're most passionate. Now let's put words to it.
Like personal development is great. Personal growth is great. Growth as a leader obviously will have a cascading effect, right? It'll be contagious within an organization. But then tacking on a defined purpose at the end, I feel like is what, from what I've seen, really distinguishes like our model for mission and our mission from a lot of other missions that I see organizations and businesses run with.
Yeah. I mean, it's almost like there's the reason, then there's the reason behind the reason. And I would say in ours, there's the reason behind the reason behind the reason, right? So it's like we exist to help impact-driven leaders step into who they were created to be. Like that is both a statement of what we do and why we do it, right? Although it doesn't get into the practical elements, like it doesn't say anything about one-on-one coaching, team trainings, in-person experiences, anything of that, right? We'll get to why mission statements are so crucial for scaling businesses in a bit. But that is a reason why we exist. It's not the full reason, though. There's the reason behind the reason that when an impact-driven leader steps into who they were created to be, others benefit. And like, that's what I'm so stoked about is whenever I'm talking to a room of 45 at our most recent in-person experience, I am not talking to 45 people there, right? I am talking to 45 leaders, which means at minimum, it's not unlikely to assume, or it's not unreasonable to assume that I'm actually addressing 450 people. Because I mean, it seems like a common thing that if someone's part of Path for Growth, they have like 7 kids or something like that. So they're at the very least influencing their home. The average is probably 3 or 4 in reality, but they're influencing their home. But then beyond that, some of these people lead 300-person companies. So they're reaching all of that, right? And so the reason behind the reason is that others benefit from the overflow of this impact-driven leader stepping into who they were created to be. And then the reason behind the reason behind the reason is Matthew 5:16. In the same way, let your light shine before men that may see your good deeds, right? That they may see your personal growth, your business growth, your leadership growth, the way you treat your team members, the way that you're moving forward in business, that they see all that, they see your good deeds, and they glorify the Father in heaven, right? That when people are so oriented for the right reasons in growing in a healthy way, it's actually so attractive that people can't help but lift their eyes towards heaven and say, man, thank God for that. And they will actually say that and do that regardless of what they believe. They might even not necessarily overtly say they believe in God, and they will still say, thank God. Right? And that's like, man, God, even when people don't realize it, God is being glorified in the work that's being done.
So after you established the mission for Path for Growth, what was like the most difficult decision that you had to make? Like, was there a time that you chose mission over what felt like maybe opportunity or growth in the business, or, you know, fill in the blank?
Yeah. I mean, anytime you're clarifying what you're for, you're also saying what you're not for. And that means sacrifice, right? So decision, this is an interesting aside. The word decision comes from the Latin root word that means scissors. And so it's to cut. And so anytime you're making a decision, I think of this as advanced decision making, right? It's the one decision that will make thousands of decisions for you, again, moving forward. Then yeah, you're saying I'm cutting, I'm sacrificing. There's certain things that I'm not going to be able to do. I mean, there's a multitude of things, and I would say there's a multitude of examples, especially in core values. But as it relates to mission, I would say one that I experience most personally is I have ideas all the time about things that we could technically do with the resources that we now have because of the business that we've grown. Like, I have an aspiration one day to start a salsa company, right? Like, that's something that I very much want to do, right? And
I support that.
That's good. Praise God. Yeah. So it can be really tempting to be like, well, we've got all these Path for Growth resources. Like, why can't we just shoehorn the salsa company as like a side thing that Path for Growth does? Make that part of the Path for Growth P&L, and it's just like this side quirky thing. And it's like, I could try really hard to make up an answer of how salsa helps people step into who they were created to be so that others benefit and God is glorified. And it's like that isn't actually tied into the mission. That's a little bit of a quirky example, but it's like, I truly have to take one of my personal passions and say, that's a good passion. It's just not a Path for Growth passion. And it doesn't fall under the Path for Growth umbrella. And so it means it's either going to have to be a different thing that's drawing from my personal resources, not Path for Growth resources, or it's going to have to not happen. So I guess the mission causes me to exercise a level of self-restraint. And I would also say it's not just self-restraint. If I announce to our team, hey, we are starting a salsa company right now, and I need y'all to passionately get behind this and sell this, the first question they or y'all would have for me is, how does that tie into the mission, Alex? Like, you gotta connect the dots for me. Not telling me I can't do it, but you gotta connect the dots for me on how that connects to the mission, because the thing that I signed up to work for at Path for Growth above all else is the mission. And I didn't sign up to be a salsa purveyor if that doesn't connect to the mission.
Yeah. Well, and I think that just speaks to the power that it is to A, have your whole team memorize the mission, but also B, for it to be like a part of the culture and repeated consistently and front of mind at team meetings. Like, I mean, yeah, we were talking about this. We've talked about this a little bit. I would actually like to have more of a conversation about this with non-anxious presence and social media. And like, how do we, I think that's one of the things that I'm personally wrestling with right now is like, there is a method to get a hook, to engage on social media, to create anxiety, to create anger, to create frustration in a way that like keeps people engaged. And then there's the way that we're called to as Christians, and when you factor in Path for Growth's mission, it's like, how does playing into these strategies that work on social media, how does that weigh into who we are as a business and the value we want to provide and what we want to stand for? And so it's been really interesting, like trying to navigate that. It's like, man, social media and marketing can be so toxic, and you could get so off course with it if you were just focused on growth and you didn't have a mission as a sounding board to be like, hey, yeah, we're not going to engage in that way. We're going to think creatively, and we're going to come up with a different solution.
Yes, I love that you brought that up, because in the absence of a clearly defined purpose or mission statement, effectiveness and efficiency hacks will always be loud, right? Like we actually did work with a social media company for a while, and then ended up ending it just because it didn't feel on mission or on brand. And it was because they were really coaching us on writing scripts that would basically appeal to people's most base level emotions, right? We're gonna say this thing in the absolute most controversial or polarizing way, was what they were essentially coaching us on. Like, you need to be more controversial. You need to be more polarizing. You need to make sure that if there's something that happens that everyone's talking about, you are online within 10 minutes giving your hot takes on that.
Yeah.
And it's like, if my reason is effectiveness, efficiency, fame, right? Then if that's my reason, then I should follow all of those strategies. If I have a higher reason, a higher calling, a higher standard, which is represented our mission, then I'm going to say I understand that might be the fastest way to get more views and more followers in the next 10 days. But that certainly contradicts some of our core values, and it's not even aligned with our core purpose. So I can't do that right now. And so there's a level of accountability embedded in describing your mission, which is why some people avoid it. It's also why, like, some people are like, oh, I did this like 20-minute one-pager on write your mission statement for your company, and now I've got it, and I downloaded it as a free download online. Do not do that, right? Because if you do this right, you are making a decision now that will affect you for minimum the next 10 years. And so it's worth the time, energy, manpower invested to really get it right.
What would you say to maybe a leader or a business owner who is like sitting here right now and they're going, man, like we have a mission, or maybe we've never even defined a mission, but like I had a mission in mind and we have just gotten so off base. Like what is their first step that they would need to take?
Recommit yourself to the mission. So if there is a reason why you started, and that reason is still prevalent, because I think it can shift and change, although I would hold it with a pretty tight grip, because oftentimes it doesn't. I would recommit yourself to that mission. And then I would recommit yourself and hopefully your closest leaders to whatever it takes, right? We are going to get back to why this business exists and why we started in the first place. And that is going to be difficult. And then from there, from a practical standpoint, this will exist in the core values conversation we have as well. I would start with an apology. Right? You're going to have to make some hard decisions if you've deviated, because you're basically saying we have gone way off track and we're going to have to get back on track. That might mean that we hired some people that we shouldn't have never hired because they weren't mission aligned. We might have launched some things. We might have done some things or said some things. There's a whole multitude of ways you can deviate from your mission. And ultimately, you've got to take responsibility of that was my fault. As a leader, I allowed that to happen. And so I would start with, hey, I just want to let y'all know I am sorry, because there's a reason why this business exists and why we started. And it's something that I deeply care about as the owner or leader of this business. And we have deviated in these ways. And the reason why we've done that is because I've allowed it and tolerated it happening. But what I am going to let you know is this is my and our line in the sand moment. We are going to do things differently moving forward, and we are going to recommit ourselves to this mission. And if you want to be a part of that, then I want you to be a part of this. If you don't want to be a part of that, we can still be friends. I just want you to know that this is why we exist and this is where we are going, and we are going to realign ourselves to this, and we are not turning around, right? It has to be a very firm ownership, but then also clear, assertive redirection of why the business exists and where we're going.
It does make me think of JP from Austin, right? Five Stone. And I mean, he spoke at our experience and he shared a little bit of that story. I would like to hear way more about it.
It's so good. But we should include, JP did a value-based business podcast for us years ago that we should include in the show notes of this episode, but we need to have him on again.
Yeah. And I mean, obviously, that was my first exposure to him and his team. But he had how many? 5 team members, 6 at the experience.
Oh, he had 8 team members. At the
team members there, and the culture of their team and the people that were. I mean, everyone was just so aligned and grounded, and it was just so clear that like this difficult decision that he had made years prior to realign himself and his business had paid off in dividends.
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty fascinating to look at the graphics behind the business and even to talk to him about his general enjoyment of the business that he owned and stress level associated with the business, because he would say we grew to 60, I think it was 60 team members. And then I had this realization, like, we are bigger than we've ever been, but I am enjoying this the least I've ever enjoyed it. And I'm more stressed out than I've ever been. And the reason why is because the team had gotten away from the core reason, right? And he would be the first to say, I allowed that to happen. Mm-hmm. The thing that I freaking love and honestly am inspired by about JP is that when he owns something, he owns it. And he says no more. And they recommitted themselves to mission and core values. The team is now 30 people, right? And this is years and years and years removed. And it is doing exponentially. This is not an exaggeration. It is doing exponentially more business than they were doing with 60 people. Mm-hmm. And he would tell you that's the power of having a unified, culturally aligned team where just think about this. The difference that it makes when every single person on your team, especially if it's 30 people, enjoy the people that they're working with.
Yeah.
Like, I know I get minimum 20% better personally whenever I'm working with people that I enjoy working with. And that's like a minimum. There could be evidence where I actually get 100% better when I'm with people that I enjoy working with. Praise God, you're one of those people, right? So it's like, I get way better. And then we apply that across every single team member. And it's like, if we're saying people get minimum 20% better when they enjoy the people, feel aligned with the people, are motivated by the people that they're working with, you have to guard that as a leader. And if you've ever deviated from that, like you've got people that aren't on mission in the building, it is the single most high leverage action you can take to either coach them up or coach them out. Because cultural alignment it has a multiplying effect on your business's performance and impact.
Mm. It sounds like that's gotten increasingly more important for you in Path for Growth and the hiring process.
For sure. And it's become more clear for us. Mm-hmm. Like we're engaging with the hiring strategic priority right now. And this is something that I learned from JP is it's like, we have now established the standard. We have the funds to hire someone. We have the work to hire someone. We are establishing the standard of we will not move faster than our ability to get cultural rock stars. Mm-hmm. We are going to pray for God to send us great people, right? And if there's someone that, man, they would crush the job, but the team is not convinced this is a cultural rock star, I'm not doing it. I've seen enough examples from myself personally, but also the businesses that I work with, that it is not worth it. It is not worth it. And if you hire a high performer that is a culturally neutral, you are actually hiring a detractor. I actually believe that. And so the thing that is probably worth hitting on here too, the stronger your culture is, the more true that is. If we have a milquetoast culture that we haven't actually defined things that we're unique about, bold about, that differentiate us, things like that, then you hire someone that's culturally neutral, it's not going to make that huge of an impact. If you have a remarkable culture and you hire someone that's culturally neutral, it will massively detract. And so we are actively in the process of making it harder for people to work for us because we are actively in the process of making our culture more remarkable. And that's the type of business that I want to lead, quite frankly. It's the type of business that I want to be a part of. And so we're going to double down, and y'all can check in 2 years and see how it works out for us.
And I mean, what's incredible is it really does all go back to mission, right? It goes back to, like, is the team aligned and headed the same direction in, like why they're even here, why they're working.
Yeah. And let's think about the baseline too. What I don't want working for our team is someone that's like, oh, now that I know that mission at Path for Growth, I could see myself aligning my life to that and like being passionate about that. No, I want someone that's like, I finally found a place that exists for the same reason that like I love to get out of bed every morning and like foaming at the mouth passion of like, you're telling me I could get paid to do this work? That's the type of person that like we know we've nailed it. And there's already evidence in their life of how they're living it out. Like every single person on our team right now, we are culturally, I would put us at the level of culturally exceptional on our team right now. And we haven't always been there. We are there right now. I would say every single person on our team right now, I can point to evidence before they were hired and certainly now of how they were living the mission before they even knew it existed. They were stepping into the man or woman they were created to be so that others benefit and God is glorified. And they were already passionate about it. And now it just turns out that there's a paycheck associated with it.
Yeah. Break that down a little bit more, like how having a clear mission helped you identify those things in those individuals.
Yeah. Well, the interview process is kind of like dating, right? And have you ever gone to a first date and you're supposed to ask great questions, right, at your first date. And so you show up to your first date and you say, oh, I'm so excited about this, right? I didn't swipe right on you. I don't know what way you swipe for people like this.
I've been sworn off dating apps a long time ago.
Okay, good. Praise God. Culturally aligned, right? Only half getting there. So we're sitting down for our first date and I've been waiting to ask you this question. Who am I? How on earth is the person that you're dating going to answer that question, right? So many of us expect people to tell us about who we are in the interview process. What you want to do is say, hey, I'm excited to ask you questions, but I also want to let you know this is who I am, and this is what I'm passionate about, and this is what I stand for. And what we're really trying to figure out here is, does who you are align with who I am? So many people, they don't know who they are. And so they're actually spending 50% of their time in the interview process meandering around who am I and trial and error around who am I. And then they're trying to figure out if this puzzle piece fits into a puzzle piece that they don't even know what it looks like yet. It's virtually impossible, right? And so that's why it's so critical that we do this, like we spend this time on the front end to say, who am I? Really, what we're saying is, who are we? So that really what we've got is a puzzle piece. And then our interview process is oriented around, does this candidate sitting across from me fit into that puzzle or not? And a lot of times, the more clear you are on who you are, the more the wrong people will self-select out. They'll say, oh, I'm actually not that passionate about that. And I actually think y'all are kind of weird. And you will say, yes, we are. We are not kind of weird. We are extremely weird. And you would hate it here. And you should just check out of the process right now, right? I think is important to keep in mind.
Yeah. I keep thinking of when it was you, Michelle, and I flew to Colorado Springs for, what was it, like 40 hours or something?
Yes.
To look at our next experience location for next year. And
you and I were up at probably 4 or 4:30 that morning.
Yeah.
And this was still within your first 4 months of working here or something like that. Yep. And Michelle was also up at 4 a.m. that morning. We met her. I think we had a full day. I mean, we probably did work stuff for 12 hours minimum.
For sure.
And then we weren't done.
No.
Like, we were like, okay, from here. And it was like genuinely, like, I feel like we made a collective decision. I didn't feel like I was forcing y'all.
No.
We were like, well, Manitou Incline is right down the road. Yeah. What if we go do that? Which is to clarify for people, this is a 2,000 foot incline in 1 mile. I mean, it is the absolute most absurd mile you've ever done. And yeah, we did that afternoon. So we had like a 16-hour work day. You and I woke up early the next morning and at sunrise went and recorded Worth It Wednesday videos. Then we had intentional business discussion about which property we were going to land on for our next experience. And then within 40 hours, we were back on a plane headed home again. And what was the point? I just recounted the story.
Yeah, I mean, that, like, just the fact alone that we all showed up that Monday and had all woken up super early, and then collectively we were like, yeah, let's go hike a mountain. Like, let's go walk up this endless staircase, and like, that'll be fun. And it was really fun.
Yeah.
And like, to work at that level And to come to the end of something like that and be like, okay, yes, I'm tired. Like I didn't necessarily sleep the best. Like we've been running for 40 hours, but like, man, it was fun. And it was so great to see Michelle in person and like be in another location with you and like get the things that we got done. And just the ideation and like it was very life-giving, even though we were working, right?
And so, that's cultural alignment, exactly. Right? So I want to hit home on that. There's two types of conversations I could have on the back end of a trip like that as an owner. Conversation one is with someone that says, I didn't get paid overtime for that. Like, that was a bit much. Or like, you just absolutely wore me out and I needed to take like 5 days off because of what we just did. Or, what's in it for me? Essentially, like all of those conversations. Or you can have the conversations that we actually had is I'm coming home and telling Aspen, man, that was a fast trip, but that was a blast. Like, I love that. And then I have my next one-on-one with you and Michelle both the next week. And both of you, it's your highlight or win, that trip. And you're telling me how grateful you are. And you're just like so much more excited about the next experience because of what we were able to do and everything like that. And there are so many benefits associated with those latter conversations, but one that people often underestimate is like, what does that do for my morale? The thing that I enjoy and love doing as a person is the thing that my team of the business that I own also loves doing and enjoys doing. And I'm not having to apologize for basically me being me, essentially. It's like, one is a recipe for incredible levels of stress and guilt, and you're just setting yourself up to just not be in a good place mentally. Versus this is like, I literally just feel like I got to go on a 40-hour trip with friends and we got to do great work and experience creation, be physically active together. And now we're both just goo gagaing over how great it was. Oh my gosh. The impact of that cannot be measured.
Well, and what's incredible and kind of bringing it back to mission and our mission is like a month later, we all flew to Austin and we had 4 days in Austin. And man, I enjoyed being able to scope out a next year's location, got me excited for this coming experience a month later. But then also, just being in the room with the team, being able to interact with so many of our customers and so much of the community in person in such like a real and raw space. And it just goes to show like our entire team is just so well aligned in like, this is our purpose. This is why we exist. And then we all show up to the experience. And it's like, this is the time of the year in which like is the absolute best. We are the best at what we do.
Yeah,
right?
It's like Super Bowl. It's Christmas, right? Yep. Yeah, it's our finest hour in some way. It's like the concentrated version of what we've been doing for the entire year. Now we're just all in the same place doing it.
Yep.
Yeah. But one thing I would call attention to with that, though, is the same mission can apply to different personality types. And so the experience is such a great example. Is like, I love checking in with our team after the experience because I'll talk to you and Kyle and I'll be like, how are you doing? And you're like, I like really needed to recover with some alone time. And like, I needed to go, like, that was a lot of people time. And I loved every bit of it. It was awesome. And like, I'm so grateful for it. Wouldn't change a thing, but I need to like go into a dark corner and hide for like 3 days before I get back into society again. Meanwhile, I call Matt and Matt says, I'm just so energized. I'm so engaged. I'm just so ready to be around people more. And like, this is everything I live for. And he's like, more people, right? The difference between essentially extroverts versus introverts, right? Where do you get your energy from? You and Kyle are not any less on mission than Matt is what I would say. Because you both love the mission. You're passionate about the mission. You two just happen to be introverted. Matt happens to be extroverted. And so I would just keep that in mind for people, is because sometimes if you're not careful, you could over prioritize extroversion because those are the people that are the most vocally or visibly on mission. And that can really, really be a mistake.
Yeah. Or often even sometimes just the most like charismatic in an interview process, right?
For sure.
Let's dive into, I know we have a course around this. We're working on hopefully making that even more accessible in the near future.
Yeah.
But yeah, let's dive into like what it looks like to practically establish and build and sustain a good mission.
Yeah. So it's one of our 12 fundamentals for healthy growth. And there's a number of ways that we have done this with companies around the country since we started our company. The current way that we do it is people work on their mission statement through one-on-one coaching, or we also provide team training sessions where we go on site with your leadership team and we walk you and your leadership team through a process for really getting the right words to why do we exist as a company and codifying that. But really what we're going to start with is an incredible amount of context gathering on, hopefully, if the founder is still around, we want to talk to the founder. We want to know why they started. We want to know what was important to them. We want to know what they were most excited about at the beginning. And sometimes the founder's like, well, I started out of necessity. Like I had to pay the bills. That's not noteworthy, right? So like even that is noteworthy because paying the bills, like whose bills? And like, so provision is clearly important for you. Why didn't you go get a job, right? And then why was it important to get into this line of work? And then beyond even just the founding story, we want to ask a ton of questions around, tell me about the times when you and your business are at your absolute best. Tell me about when the work is most energizing for you. Tell me about your most ideal customers and the impact that you've made on them. Tell me about the thing that when you see it occur in your business, it's an absolute grand slam for you as an owner or you as a leader. And we could spend more time on this in the podcast if we want to, but it's really important that you craft the right people in the room for the mission, right? And the process that you work through to get the right people in the room, to get the right input in the room is really, really critical because this is something you are committed to living with. And so probably the people that are in the room should likely have a level of ownership and staying power because you might be living with them too, right? Is what I would say. And so we're putting all that information in. A lot of times that's where people stop and they just have, a bunch of loosely held together ideas. What we're going to do is we're going to put all of those up on a whiteboard and we're going to start distilling and say, what are the buckets that these fall into? And it's more art than science, but we're going to say, which of these have the most oomph to them? Which ones feel the most right? Which ones oftentimes when you were talking about it, you spoke with the most passion. I've been in these sessions before and it's like they're giving me a lot of answers about why the business exists. And then I'm asking them a bunch of questions and then I get them to tell one story and that story causes them to start crying. And I'm like, you're not a person that cries. That right there, whatever that is, that's what we have to codify, right? And so what carries the most emotional resonance within the team? All of those questions, we're going to kind of just isolate our categories. And then based on those categories, we're then going to say, okay, if we were to take these categories of statements of purpose and to distill them down into a single powerful sentence that is present, portable, and personal. So present today, this isn't some aspirational mission for the future. There at least has to be seeds of how this is already being played out today. Portable, we need to make this sentence memorizable. So it can't be, Paul in the New Testament adding comma, right? Like just a run-on sentence through and through, right? We got to make it portable and then we got to make it personal. How do we choose language that is uniquely yours and uniquely your team's? And how do we do that? Well, oftentimes it's language that you and your team are already using. And so we're going to isolate those categories. We're going to build them into a specific sentence. And then really we get into wordsmithing and word defining till we land on a draft. And then we can talk about what you do with that draft. It's important you don't land on a final statement. You land on a draft because then we have stuff that we can do with that draft. But anything about that process you want to dive deeper into or you got questions about?
Yeah. You talk about this, if you're already established with a team, right, bringing people in on this, what are maybe some guidelines that you would use to decide who's qualified or who should be included in this conversation?
Yeah. So obviously there's contextual things here. Are we talking about a 300-person team? Are we talking about a 20-person team? I would say all information is valuable, is a principle. And so you're about to make decisions. It's really good for you to leverage the whole team to get information. What that could look like is you sending out a Google form to everyone and just saying, we're doing some work on our organization's purpose. What I want to know from you is, when are we at our best? Who are our most ideal customers? And from your experience, like, what are your favorite moments working for this business? The question that you are not putting in that Google form is, what should our mission statement be, right? And you are also not making any guarantees about anything that they put into that form will show up in the final mission statement. You're just saying, I'm just getting my thumb on the pulse of what our people, all 300 of them, think about our company and when we're at our best. And what you'll see is, a lot of times we have leaders do that, and the forms are incredibly encouraging and incredibly insightful, right? But what we don't want to do is mission statement by committee, right? Because it just looks like a jumbled mess if we do that. In terms of the people that are in the room making the decisions with all the information that we have, all the things that are on the whiteboard, the core themes, the categories, all of that, what is our statement going to be? I would say most likely is your leadership team, which we actually have criteria in our leadership team fundamental for who should be on your leadership team. But these are people that you would say, even though we don't have the mission defined yet, they are already living the mission. And like, you're like, I don't know what it is yet. I just know that they're part of it, right? You trust their feedback, their pushback, and their advice, right? They're people that probably either they have some established tenure with the organization, or you envision them having tenure with the organization. And this is critical. You want them to be a part of the decision, right? Like, you're like, for multitude of reasons, I really want this person to speak into this decision. Those are just some criteria of who's in that room to make that decision about what the mission statement's going to be.
So once you've established a draft, then what? Yeah, I know you mentioned there are things you can do with the draft. What does that look like?
So what I encourage people, and where I see people have the most success, is eventually I think it would actually be very good for you to take the mission statement that you've created and to put it on a concrete block somewhere and then hang that concrete block up, right? Artifacts are actually part of making culture come to life. So physical objects that represent the culture is actually really, really important.
It makes me think of Ted Lasso with the crooked believe sign up on his office.
I haven't seen Ted Lasso, but that sounds like a Ted Lasso core value or something like that. Yeah, absolutely. So I would say that is going to be important. But before you print the t-shirts or make the coffee mugs or things like that with the mission, I would say just test drive it for 60 days. And what I want you and your leadership team to do is to memorize that mission statement and keep it in mind, and then just look for either confirmation or contradiction of, did we nail it, right? Maybe that's confirmation in terms of you're having conversation with someone about the work that they're doing and they are clearly really enjoying it. And you just ask them, why are you enjoying that so much? And they describe their answer to you, and you're like, oh, that is like, they either said word for word the mission statement we just created, or they hit on all of the themes that are in the mission statement. Maybe, the organization does shout outs at a team meeting or something like that. And the things that people are shouting out, that people are clearly most engaged in, are things directly related to your mission, right? Maybe you hear some of the words and you're like, I wasn't even looking for it before, but we're actually using some of these words. Or that's confirmation. Maybe it's contradiction. Maybe you're like, there's a better, simpler way to say this. Or a lot of times what I see is we had like this 3-part sentence that we created. And the more I think about it, the more it's like one part of that is actually the mission. And I'm starting to see that these other 2 parts are just ancillary pieces to why we're most excited about this. And so maybe it's 30 days, maybe it's 60 days. You run a little bit of a test period. And then on the back end of that, you say, okay, we're going to solidify, finalize, roll out to the whole team, hold the party, launch the cannon, print the t-shirts, the whole shebang.
Are there any like mistakes that people make as it pertains to mission statement that people should be aware of?
I'm so glad you asked. The first one is just a misconception of what we're actually talking about here. A lot of times people think about their mission statement as marketing collateral, And the reason why they think that is because there's groups out there that teach that. Just let me be very clear. That's not what we at Path for Growth are teaching, right? Like your mission statement, from my perspective, is most powerful when you are not thinking about it primarily as marketing collateral, right? We are thinking about our mission statement as the statement that rallies our team in the building around why we do what we do to serve people outside the building. And when you think of it as marketing collateral, the questions that people are often going to ask you whenever they think about your mission statement or whenever you're evaluating your mission statement is like, well, what do you do, right? Like what, like, can you describe it? Like, it doesn't really describe what you do for people, like in terms of the service you provide, one-on-one coaching, team training experiences. That's not what this is for. We do that in other places. It's just not this. And what I often see is people try to make it something that is a cultural element, but also marketing collateral. And in doing so, they reduce and dilute the cultural power of it. Listen, the people on our team do not need me to remind them. Remember, we do one-on-one coaching. They are very aware of that. The thing that they need me to remind them of is we exist to help impact-driven leaders step into who they were created to be so that others benefit and God is glorified. Marketing collateral is a separate conversation. Does it mean that there won't be customers that are deeply attracted to your mission and excited about your mission? No, I actually think customers will be more excited about your mission when you ride it our way than as marketing collateral. I would just say don't try to shoehorn both objectives into the same sentence is really, really critically important. The second one I would say is not being intentional about rollout. Anytime you launch anything this big, the quality of adoption often reflects the quality of launch. And you want people to act like this is a big deal. You have to treat it like a big deal in the way you launch things. And that doesn't mean you have to throw some massive resource intensive party. But sometimes the best way to convey that something's a big deal is to put it in writing and like print. Sometimes if I show up to a meeting and I printed stuff, people are like, wow, he's serious about this, right? Like he took the time to go find a printer, right? Or create coffee mugs with it, or like just do something that conveys to people like we are taking this extremely seriously, right? Maybe it's having customers come in and tell the story of how the mission has impacted them. There's so many multitude of ways. And then the third mistake that people don't make is they don't have a strategy for launch, or they don't have a strategy for sustained adoption. And so ingraining this in your onboarding process, we recommend having a quarterly process of evaluating your mission that we talk about in the Path for Growth Fundamentals. Red, yellow, greening, are we living in alignment with it? Making it a part of your team communication rhythm, regularly referring back to the mission. There's got to be rhythms associated with this. Otherwise, it will be a dusty piece of paper in a binder that never gets opened again. So making sure we're not treating it as marketing collateral, making sure that we focus on the launch, and then making sure we create rhythms and systems for continued and sustained adoption.
I mean, I feel like I've talked to multiple business owners. I've been a part of organizations where that's the case. It's like on onboarding, it's like, here's our mission, here's our core values, here's what we're about. And then it's never mentioned again. Yeah. Or it's like this, it's almost like this joke, that's like, oh yeah, like this is what we stand for when decisions are made that is completely not in line with
which
what
that is so, if you are an impact driven leader, that is so sad.
Yeah.
Like that should break your heart that the purpose, the theoretical purpose of why your mission exists is now a joke.
Yep.
To your organization. And a lot of times why it becomes a joke is because it was never serious to begin with. It was never like we went through this methodical, intensive process and we invested time and money to define why our organization actually exists. Because if you actually invest all that time and money, you and your organization take it more seriously. It's when we just put something together haphazardly that, of course, we're not actually going to take it seriously years down the road.
In closing, is there anything you'd want to say about sustaining our mission in general?
I guess the final word of encouragement that I would give to the leaders that are listening to this podcast is you have to stay zealous about your mission, right? Like you have to stay passionate about it personally. And so as you think about rhythms and systems for sustained adoption and even improvement within your team, I would also ask yourself the question, what's the rhythm that I need to make sure that my heart is still soft to this mission? How do I make sure that the same way I was bouncing out of bed year one whenever I started this organization, because I was just so on fire with the purpose and the way we were serving people and the calling that we had to do this. What rhythms do you have in place to keep making you that person? Because your team needs you to have that level of energy and zeal if they're ever going to have a comparable level of energy and zeal for the mission. And so make sure you define ways for yourself personally to stay passionate, warm, white hot on the reason why you started the business and why the business exists.
And I guess to commend you, like that's something that I see that you do really well. And I consistently, like I'm always like, Alex is practicing what he preaches. And I just can consistently find myself saying things like that. So yeah, thanks to you and thanks for this conversation.
Well, I always love ending on a compliment. So thank you. Appreciate it, Ben. Hey, y'all, thanks so much for watching. If you want more content like this, we've got some killer stuff planned. So make sure you rate, review, and subscribe. Let's go, let's go, let's go.